Hi, it's Sheridan Webb here from the Training Designers Club, which is the place to go for practical L&D support, especially if you work on your own. And today I'm attempting to answer a very difficult question, which is particularly relevant if you're freelance. And that question is, how much should I charge for my training design? Well, let's just get it out there right now. There is no right and wrong answer. Pricing is a very personal subject, and really and truly it is entirely up to you, how you work with your clients, what you can justify, and the kind of relationship that you have with them. But I'm just going to talk through some of the things that I think you should take into account when coming up with a figure. Just before I do that, your day rate is your day rate. I'm not going to tell you what a great day rate is and what it isn't. I've seen people charge anything from £200 a day to £2,000 and everything in between. So it is what it is. It's industry specific, it's topic specific. So you have to just work with your day rate. What I would say is that you don't just add value when you're stood in front of people, you're adding value when you're researching and when you're designing as well. So just a question to put to you, should you automatically discount design? It very much depends. And it depends on very many things. So some of the things that we need to take into account is what exactly are you doing in terms of your design for a starter. So if you are just tweaking an existing course, that's obviously not going to take you very long. And particularly if you're going to be doing a dozen or so delivery days, maybe that is something that you would do for free. And I totally understand that. It's a great value added service for your clients. As I often did, I would have something that I could kind of use as a base. I had bits and pieces that I could use, but I always started from scratch because I found it was easier anyway. But I did have some exercises that I could throw in, or maybe I had a good handout that I didn't have to recreate. So that's probably the most common form of training design that we get involved in. And then there is something which is completely from scratch, brand new subject, brand new client, a big steep learning curve to go through. And that is, again, another level of design. Just before I go any further, I probably ought to clarify that I'm talking about designing live training events, whether they're face-to-face or virtual. I'm not talking about e-learning. That's not my background. I can't advise you on that. And if you search on Google, how long does it take to design training, it will quote you e-learning numbers, and it will quote you anything between 5 hours and 200 hours for 1 hour's worth of training. So really, is that helpful? I don't know. But anyway, back to what we should take into account when designing live training. So we've talked about, is it just a tweak? Is it completely a blank sheet of paper, or is it something in between? The next thing to take into account is who is it for? So is it just for you? Is no one else ever going to see the training materials? Are you going to be sharing them with associates, or are you going to be, as I was, handing them over to the client? Because each different level requires a different level of detail and checking, I suppose. So if you're just designing them for you and you want to hold on to IP and you're keeping them close to your chest, then you are not going to be able to charge quite the same as someone like me who would be handing everything over to the client. That's not to say that you can't charge something, especially if you are designing bespoke case studies or role plays, for example. That's something that you're going to have to invest time in and you can't use with somebody else. So we need to think about these things, and that kind of brings me on to my next consideration, which is what exactly are you designing? Are you just designing a PowerPoint deck and a few notes for you? If so, that's a very quick piece of design and your client might push back at paying for it. If you are going to be designing detailed case studies, detailed pre-work, a blended solution, if you're going to be creating a bespoke game or creating role play briefs for actors, obviously there's a huge amount of work going into that, and that does absolutely have to be reflected in your design time. We shouldn't just be absorbing that into the delivery fee, especially if you can't use it somewhere else. If you're designing for an open program, then I would suggest that your design time has to be absorbed into your delivery fees, because you don't know who's going to be coming on this course, you don't know how many times you're going to run it, and it's perhaps unfair to expect people to pay a design fee in those situations. So we have to take each situation on its own merits, really, when we're deciding what exactly should we be charging back to the client in terms of our design time. It is important to focus on outputs, not inputs. Now, with design, we spend a lot of time researching, we spend a lot of time thinking and being creative. And it's difficult to recharge that time to a client. But bizarrely, it doesn't seem difficult to recharge them for the time we spend typing. But our genius is not in typing. And if we're using tools like ChatGPT, that's going to speed that aspect up, and thank goodness for that. I do have a course on how you can use ChatGPT to save time with your training design, and I'll put a link to that under this video. And I would definitely push back on anybody who's saying, well, it used to take you 4 days to design training and now you're using ChatGPT. It's only taking you 2, therefore I'm only paying you 2. They are paying you for the ultimate outcome, and that's the creativity, that's the relevance, that's how accessible the training is going to be, that's how it flows, that's the blend, and that is something that only you can bring to the party. So let's just make sure that we are focusing on the things that add value rather than just the things that take time. And talking about the things that take time, when I was doing a lot of corporate training design, I used to say, well, it'll take me 4 days to design this workshop. And I'd be having this conversation on the Friday, and then somebody somewhere would say, oh, great, so you'll have it to us by Thursday then. It's like, no. No, time taken is not the same as elapsed time. If I said a piece of training design was going to take 4 days, I would give myself definitely 2 weeks as a deadline to do that, because our brains don't always kick in, and you have to you can't force creativity, unfortunately. So we do have to allow ourselves these brain dead times and computer glitches and all the rest of it. So that kind of brings me in a roundabout way to what should you charge. For a 1-day workshop, I would say anything between 2 and 5 days is reasonable. As I said, it depends on the complexity of the design. So if we are doing lots of bespoke case studies, if we are creating games, that's going to take a lot longer. If it's very much a facilitated led session where people are going to be practicing for big chunks of the day, then there is less design involved in that. So really anything between 2 and 5 days, I think, is perfectly reasonable. Now, what you might choose to do is charge a slightly lower rate for design. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing right with that. That's entirely your choice. And I understand why you might do that, because it may be a shorter day. It's time that you're not spending traveling, and it looks attractive to your client as well. So that is entirely your choice whether you do that. The other thing that you can choose to do is absorb the design time into delivery. Obviously, if you've got a very large delivery schedule, if you're delivering 20 odd sessions, then again, as a negotiation point, you might want to say, do you know what, I'll do the design for free. But what I would say is, regardless of whatever approach you take, detail all of the design that you are going to do, including the research. So in your proposal, you say, I'm going to spend 2 days researching. I'm then going to scope out my solution and I'm going to submit it for your approval. I'm then going to scope out the detailed session plan, and I'm going to create a workbook, some slides, some pre-course exercises for people to do. I'm going to come up with a post-course reading list. I'm going to create some bespoke case studies. So whatever it is, detail it all out in your proposal. Put days against it. And don't forget to include amendments. Don't get caught out. 1 set of amendments is included in the price. Anything more than that is extra design time, because some people, some clients just don't know how to manage their internal stakeholders. Anyway, I digress. So when you've itemised all of the design that you will do, and let's say that comes to 6 days, You then say, I will do this at half price, or I will include this as part of the delivery, or whatever it is you want to do, but show it as work that you are doing, because if you don't, people don't realise that it's work that's being done, and that's when people completely undervalue the impact of design. So I think that's probably enough to be going on with in order to try and answer the question, how much should you charge for your training design? I can't give you a definitive answer, but I hope I've given you some really useful things to think about. And for more practical tips on training design, do check out the rest of this channel. Take a listen to the Training Design podcast, and of course visit the website, which is www.trainingdesignersclub.co.uk, for free and low cost resources, and to join our VIP community, who can be a virtual L&D team to support you.